Biases are funny. I'm not going to explain all the different types like we're in a psychology class or something, but it is truly funny that as humans, we would prefer one thing over another, even though we know it is worse. We'll make unfair arguments, ignore certain shortcomings, and sometimes straight up lie for what we like. And that is how I feel about Dragon Ball GT. There's a video on this channel where I talk about how Dragon Ball GT sucks, and I stand by everything I said back then. A couple months ago, I made a video ranking every single arc in all of Dragon Ball, and only one arc from Dragon Ball GT was good to me. I think Dragon Ball Super has much better antagonists, better writing in both the manga and anime, and made much better use of the cast of characters the series had available. Both series were noticeably inconsistent in terms of quality of the art and animation. Dragon Ball Super has episode 5, which stood out to most fans, and even though Dragon Ball GT never looked that bad, there would be moments like this. And I mean, this isn't Cell, and this definitely isn't Frieza. But in saying that, I do think that Dragon Ball Super peaked much higher when it comes to art and animation because there are episodes with beautiful animation from Naoto Shida, a more classic Dragon Ball Z feel with the supervision from Yuya Takahashi, and then there are standout episodes like episode 130, which I would argue has some of the best animation in the entire franchise. I like Super Saiyan God more than Super Saiyan 4. The biggest fights in GT don't even compare to those in Super, so why am I so comfortable saying I'll never like Dragon Ball Super more than GT? Nostalgia would be an easy answer, but I think it's a little deeper than that. I don't really feel an attachment to GT in the same way other fans do. I never even watched the series from beginning to end until I was 10 years old, and that was a couple years before Dragon Ball Super began airing. I remember loving Super Saiyan 4, but being lukewarm on the series as a whole. I also knew that Dragon Ball GT came after Dragon Ball Z, but that it wasn't canon. So Dragon Ball Super has continuity, character development, animation, and writing all on its side. But I knew how Dragon Ball GT ended, and I believe that is why, at least until Super is officially over, I'll never be able to like Dragon Ball Super more than GT. Maybe it's just me, but Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z still feel like the story we are waiting for the end of. Dragon Ball transitioned into Dragon Ball Z seamlessly, but Dragon Ball Super is in a unique position because Dragon Ball Z can't necessarily flow right into it because Super takes place before the end of Z. Yeah, 99% of the story takes place before Dragon Ball Super, but that does not change that we know how Dragon Ball Z is going to end, and therefore we know where Dragon Ball Super is leading us. The moment where Goku and Noob clash and fly away together is going to happen at some point, and currently, I'm just waiting to get there. Because again, for me, Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z are the stories I'm still waiting on the continuation for. Dragon Ball Super cannot occupy that role, at least not yet. And maybe some of these thoughts can be attributed to the long gap between Dragon Ball Z and Dragon Ball Super. Dragon Ball Super's tone and atmosphere is drastically different from Dragon Ball Z's, and it isn't a change I'm a fan of most of the time. Slice of life episodes in Dragon Ball Super seem more silly than relaxed, because when I think of slice of life episodes in Dragon Ball Z, my mind goes straight to the section of the last saga where Gohan was the main character and attending high school. Maybe criticizing the tone is a little nitpicky, but it isn't something I can ignore when watching the series. Before, I mentioned the long gap and how that could be a factor in why Dragon Ball Super feels distant from Dragon Ball Z, but the opposite is the case for GT. It came out right after Dragon Ball Z, and even though Toriyama wasn't really involved in the series, it had a similar art style, the music was similar, and it had a darker tone. And I wouldn't say Dragon Ball Z had a dark tone, but it was much closer to GT's than Super's. So even though the show is awful, it feels like the continuation of a story, which is all I wanted after seeing Goku fly off. The ending of Z left me as a viewer with so many questions. I just wanted to see what happened with him after that. After 17 years of waiting for the answer to that question, not only did we not get an answer, but we know that the answer is coming, but we have to wait through some mediocrity to get there. Dragon Ball GT gave us a continuation of Goku's story, and an ending I don't see Dragon Ball Super topping. It started with Goku telling Vegeta that the Earth is in his hands, to Bulma reminiscing on the first time she met Goku and just how long it's been, to then Goku flying through the sky with Shenron and passing over old friends who hadn't had a meaningful role in such a long time. Then going to see his first master and having one last fight with his best friend. He then makes his way to Piccolo and thanks him for all the times he had his back. This is Goku saying goodbye, because the story of Dragon Ball is the story of Goku, and the best way for a character to exit most times is on their own terms. The final minutes of the show is literally the entire canon story from beginning to end, while the best Dragon Ball song ever plays in the background. Then we see an adult Goku with the power pole flying off on Nimbus. It is such a beautiful trip down memory lane that for a couple minutes, you forget just how bad GT is. Some see the end of Dragon Ball GT as confusing, but I don't. Some see it as open-ended, but I don't think it is. Yeah, we don't know exactly what happened with Goku and Shenron, and it isn't clear how his clothes remained on the battlefield. But what was made very clear is that Goku was leaving for good. And with that, the story was too. So the reason why I like Dragon Ball GT more than Super is because it has a conclusion. Maybe my opinion will change when Dragon Ball Super goes past the end of Z, but that remains to be seen. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button and let me know if you like Dragon Ball GT more than Super. If this is your first time on the channel, subscribe so you know when I upload more videos like this. But until then, this is BigTune and thanks for watching. Y'all have a good one.